This time we would like to present consideration of a resolution approving a purchase and sale agreement for the acquisition of the building and property located at 1925 Field Court for adaptive reuse as a new City of Lake Forest police facility, and approval of contracts for building and site assessments and a space needs analysis, approval of a resolution, and approval of contracts motion. This will be presented by City Manager Jason Wisha.
Okay.
I have some comments. I'm sorry. In preparation for this, I'd like to make several points. First is 95% of the community-wide survey respondents ranked overall public safety as a very important factor when choosing to live in Lake Forest. So we know public safety is important to Lake Forest residents. The City Council's capital budget workshop last year, I identified space and operational challenges with the current public safety building, which houses both the police and fire department. Earlier this year, with the results of the community survey in hand and understanding the limitations of the existing public safety building, the City Council began discussions about making planning of a new police facility a priority. We, as a City Council, identified a new police station as a priority, and staff began investigating and evaluating possible locations for a new facility. The process has moved considerably faster than anticipated, and I think I, as well as the council, are very excited that we're here tonight to consider a potential property. At this time, we'll move on to Jason Wisha, City Manager.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And echoing the Mayor's comments, certainly at a staff level, we're really excited to share both with the City Council and the community this unique strategic opportunity that has presented itself fairly quickly. Given the magnitude of the project, we do have a lot of information to cover tonight, and we'll do our best to be concise, but just ask you to bear with us a little bit, just to provide a quick high-level summary of the topics we'll be covering tonight. First, we'll be providing background information on why we're having this conversation, namely the current challenges of meeting the modern needs of policing out of our current station. We'll then provide a summary of the city's exploration of potential new sites and how that led us to the current option that's before you tonight. We will review the terms of the negotiated purchase and sale agreement before you for consideration, as well as other approvals associated with this project that are included on tonight's agenda. And then we'll finally provide a timeline for the city's due diligence processes and what will come next over the preceding few months prior to council considering formal close on the property. And so to begin the presentation, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy Chief, Mike Lang, to walk through at a high level why the need for a new facility.
Thank you, Mr. Wisha. I apologize if I have to bend over a little bit. Thank you, Honorable Mayor Tack, and ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, for allowing me just a few moments to talk to you a little bit about what are some of the needs that are needed in law enforcement policing in 2024. Some of the limitations that our current police department, challenges that it has in front of us, and how a new facility is really going to allow us to continue to provide the highest level of service we possibly can to the residents. Our current police department was built in the 1960s and was never really designed for future expansion. So there's some limitations there. Policing has significantly changed in the last 25, 30 years. That was when the last major renovation was done to the police department, 1997, when there was anything substantial, done, and things have changed quite a bit since then. And obviously, our floor plan is a little bit limited in size. I'm very proud of the work the police department has done in my 20 years of being here and seeing how we've overcome and adapted to a tremendous amount of challenges. So I'm very proud of our ability to continue to provide a high level of service to people. However, I have some concerns about continuing to doing that in the years to come as societal expectations continue to change and the state of Illinois continues to demand more and more of our training. Our department has also become much more diverse in its personnel, as well as diverse in the equipment that's needed to perform, the services at a very high level. So space is definitely in need, for sure. We share our current space with the fire department, and they've been an amazing partner, and we do have a great relationship with them. But we really are maximizing every single inch of that entire building for all of our purposes. Unlike the fire department, who requires, centralized facilities to make sure they can respond, we don't really require any sort of, centralized facility. We can clearly operate in a non-centralized facility because we have a multitude of officers that are constantly out on patrol 24/7, 365, responding very quickly to the community needs. And we just believe that in order to maintain this high level of service that we've been able to achieve and receive very gracious remarks from the residents of Lake Forest, that a new facility at least should hopefully be considered. So one of the main challenges that we're going to face is our training needs. We have a significant amount of training that we're not only mandated to do by the state, but that we believe is important to maintaining a very high professional police department. So it's really, really significant. It's one of our biggest focus areas to constantly make sure we are well trained. The existing classroom that we have in the police department can only accommodate 15 people. So it's a very, very small room. If we wanted to contract with an outside vendor to provide some higher level training, very, very difficult to do that in our police department. Just simply very little space to have anything of substantial size. Year over year, we're obviously seeing our demands for training continue to increase. Not just in the state mandates, but also in the type of calls for service we're receiving in town, making sure our officers are well prepared. One of the examples of how we try to maximize every inch is we have what we call a defensive tactics training room. It's a small room, it's padded, and it's great for training, but we have a consortium with 5 other police departments where we actually have access to a virtual training machine, which is a very high-level, excellent training piece of equipment. We have nowhere to put it in our police department but that room. So we actually have to completely remove all of the padding and on the floor and repurpose that room for 2 months. So we can only use that room for about 10 months for DT training and then 2 months for the simulator training. So it's an example of how we have to continuously repurpose areas around our police department to maximize our training. Our evidence storage area is in the basement of our police department, and it is extremely small. We've definitely done the best we can. Deputy Chief Zelk, who's going to talk in a minute, him and his evidence custodians have done a fantastic job of constantly reimagining that area. We have to have evidence that we keep for a very long time, but we are really running out of space. And our evidence processing area is also very small and significantly outdated. There's quite a bit of equipment we would like to buy to make our job a little bit easier in terms of processing evidence. We just don't have the space for that down there, but we are doing our best with what we have. Just want to reinforce that, we are. Our investigations unit is maxed out. The space provided for our investigations, our school resource officers, our detectives, our social worker, our management analyst, very, very limited. So we have cubicles in there, really not a lot of room for much privacy, very small area, and it's very, very busy and loud because it's full at capacity. So, that presents its challenges for sure. We have one storage, a very small little storage closet in our investigations room, which is completely packed. We just have very, very, very minimal storage. So we want to bring on some additional equipment, more specifically some forensic examination equipment for computers and cell phones and tablets. That stuff requires secure rooms and space, so we have nowhere for that as of right now. And there's plenty of actually opportunities for free equipment and free training that we'd love to explore, but we just can't do that right now. Our social services department within our investigations unit has been extremely successful. Lauren Perez, our social worker, she's been with us almost 2 years now. Her role it's very much different than what we first thought, and she's extremely busy. So she's in a cubicle too. She doesn't have her own office space to talk to people. So that presents its limitations when she's interacting with citizenry. She has one small area to provide counseling services for free for residents if they need that, and that's in the lobby of our police department. And that obviously presents a privacy issue when somebody wants to come in and have a conversation with her, sensitive in nature, and they could, when they're going in or coming out, come across other residents. We just don't have that ability to provide any other space for her. So something we definitely would like to have for sure. We have very, very little actual private meeting spaces. We have one conference room in the police department that we share with the fire department, so we do make sure we're not, conflicting when we use that room, but it's only one room. We often find we have to repurpose like our roll call room into a private meeting room, but those walls are actually mostly glass and people can see in there. So we're always trying to find places to have meetings that aren't visible if they want to be private and more confidential. That's becoming very difficult. We have 6 patrol supervisors, and the patrol supervisors share 2 offices. So all the sergeants are in one small office, all the commanders are in another. Not a lot of opportunity for private conversations with officers sometimes. So there's a lot of conflicts there. We'd love to be able to expand that, have them have their own space for privacy. That would definitely help. And our patrol officers have one area where they can go and make phone calls and type reports, and that's inside of our records department. We simply don't have any other space for them to have those private conversations with victims or witnesses over the phone. That would be, I think, a great benefit if we had a little more space for our patrol officers. We have seen an increase in the number of people who want a call back, so we officers are having a lot of phone conversations. I'd like to keep those a little more private if we could. Our Sally Port is the area in which the police officers bring an offender into the jail. It's a very small space. One vehicle can fit in there at the most, and it presents challenges when booking offenders at times. And specifically, we have a number of offenders who sometimes require transportation to the hospital, and we can't bring an ambulance in for more secure transfer from them from our facility into the ambulance. So we often have to walk them outside and put them in an ambulance. There's weather implications with that sometimes. So a larger Sally Port would help us, definitely process offenders in a more efficient way and in a safer way. Our locker rooms, they haven't been upgraded in over 25 years. They are very small. We are making the absolute best of it, but it is a substantial area that we feel we could need some improvement within our police department. It is a living space for the officers. They are in there quite a bit. They are very tight. They are very cramped. Over 25% of our workforce now are women, so we've seen significant increases in the need to have better locker room facilities for our women, both sworn and non-sworn. Don't have any ability to expand on that. And obviously there comes a considerable cost with trying to upgrade those. We really genuinely believe that an improved department is going to better position us, right, to be the best police department we can in the future. The state of police hiring, as you probably are aware, is difficult to say the least. We do our best to keep our standards as high as we possibly can. I'm very proud of how we've done that. But in order to attract that best, most qualified candidate, I think we're going to need to maybe hopefully do some rethinking on where we are, because I think it will provide us an opportunity to attract that higher level candidate. And we believe that improving the facilities obviously is going to be in a great position to retain our excellent police officers. A lot of competition out there. We're trying our best to keep everybody. I think that will help a little bit as well. And finally, really, we have current needs, and then we're always going to have a ton of unknown needs. 10 years ago, some of the things that we deal with today, if you said 10 years in the past, if you just said, hey, are you going to be dealing with this in 10 years? I'd be like, no way, and we are. So we never really know what those unknown needs are. Adaptation is really, really important. As our different services evolve, we just really feel that we're going to have to be constantly adapting our work environment to provide the highest level possible. We just believe a new facility is definitely going to help us train, retain, and recruit the highest level candidates we possibly can. And I just think it's something that we really passionate about, and we just hope we take it into consideration. With that, I turn it over to Mr. Wisha for his comments.
Thanks, Mike. Already on there. So after City Council had provided direction on making a new police facility a priority, staff began evaluating possible locations for a new facility within the community. We really considered any and all options that would be available. So public property, private property, new builds, adaptive reuse of existing facilities. Throughout all of our evaluation processes, we were really focused on accommodating the specialized needs that come with a police facility, but also doing so without conflicting with existing uses or development in the surrounding area, and also without negatively impacting the visual character of the community. We engaged in significant studies and research of communities that have built new police facilities over the last decade. We looked at nearly a dozen, I believe, in total, and that analysis looked at everything from high-level cost and size of the facility to more detailed operational questions, a lot of which Mike, referenced, whether it be the inclusion of gun ranges, social worker space, training size space, covered parking, things like that. In researching the experience of other communities and also looking around town here, it quickly became apparent that available land to build new construction to meet the needs of what our department are were very limited, and the costs associated both with potential land acquisition and then construction of a new building led us to come to the conclusion fairly quickly that the best option for the city would be adaptive reuse of an existing building. So our focus in contemplating adaptive reuse of existing buildings, again, were led by several key reasons or priorities for us. One was the significant cost savings that can be achieved by adaptively reusing an existing building rather than building new. That's particularly true if you're contemplating underground parking. It was not a prerequisite for the city, but it's certainly very favorable to the city, and that's something our deputy chiefs can address later. But the cost for building underground in particular, brand new, is very prohibitive. We were also looking to take advantage of the unprecedented availability of office buildings that currently exist within the community, given the depressed commercial real estate market. I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about sort of the trends in the real estate market. We know that it's cyclical in nature, but in the current post-COVID environment, I'll say immediate post-COVID environment, we knew that there were some financial opportunities that were out there. And then third was recognizing that reuse of an existing facility is more environmentally sustainable than building new, which is also important to us given the community's recent and strong commitment to promoting environmental sustainability in all of our capital planning processes. So one thing I will note is that we were going through this exploration process. We were guided by the criteria that are established to define what we term strategic properties, is detailed in the city's formal land acquisition policy in reviewing those potential properties. As stated in that policy, a strategic property, in summary, is one that offers unique economic opportunity for the community, meets an identified public need, is appropriate for the intended public use, is in a location that is beneficial, and fifth, is available. And guided by those criteria, focus of our search quickly turned to the available office buildings in Conway Park. We, as a staff, researched and toured all of the available buildings in Conway that were on the market, weighing the pros and cons of each. Ultimately, the building at 1925 Field Court was determined to provide the greatest opportunity for adaptive reuse to meet the city's needs. As you can see some of the details here on the slide, it is a 3-story commercial office building comprising about 98,000 square feet. We recognize that the building as constructed exceeds the currently anticipated square footage needed for a police facility. As Deputy Chief Lang said, that this does provide us the opportunity to maintain some flexibility in the future, not knowing what the demands of policing might look like 10, 20 years from now. But this also provides us an opportunity to entertain discussions with other public safety agencies that may be interested in leasing some of the available space that exists in the building that we may not utilize. The building was constructed in 2008 and really lends itself to configuring both publicly accessible and secured areas, both inside and outside the building, very critical for a police facility. Importantly, the building has 66 underground parking spaces. And again, underground parking both for maintenance and care of the fleet within the police department, as well as for transporting prisoners, provides a lot of benefits for us, and was certainly attractive to staff in reviewing these options. One additional added benefit to just looking at all of the properties out there are their proximity to our city's municipal services building out there. It's important to us, or at least provides some value to us, given that is the location where all of our police vehicles are maintained and fueled. In addition, the police facility is a compatible and complementary use to the established office uses that exist in Conway Park. The use as considered here meets all of the applicable zoning criteria. I note that because we have received potential interest, or are aware of potential interest, not just in Conway Park, but if you've been reading the news throughout the region and the country about potential adaptive reuse of office buildings converted to multifamily residential. There were some preliminary conversations with the Conway Park Owners Association, and they made clear their objection to residential conversions at this time. Unlike proposals like that, this meets all current zoning codes. We believe the Conway Owners Association, through our conversations, are supportive of this use. And in fact, in the long run, perhaps the presence of a new public safety building in Conway Park may be attractive to prospective tenants from a security perspective, to know that we would be a neighbor. So really pleased with the negotiation process and how it played out. I want to take just a brief moment to highlight the key terms of the purchase sale agreement, to be transparent with the community about what is being considered tonight. As the mayor noted, this negotiation process did move very quickly, but I'm confident that the city not only received favorable terms throughout the negotiation process, but really accomplished the key objectives that we had going into that process. As you can see on the slide, we have the opportunity to acquire this building for a competitive price of $3.5 million. That's just over $35 per square foot. I'll provide some financial context for what that means comparatively on the next slide here. But if this is something that the council wanted to entertain, as Elizabeth had noted in her presentation, it's anticipated staff would recommend utilizing FY24 general fund surplus revenues to fund the acquisition of the property. So we were able to acquire this property without having to draw down existing reserves or borrow. And again, we'll talk in a few minutes about future costs that will be associated with the project. If the city council moves forward tonight with executing the purchase sale agreement, as you can see, that will trigger a 90-day window for the city to conduct its due diligence, with an option to extend for an additional 30 days. Deputy Chief Kevin Zelk will walk you through that due diligence process and some of the other approvals that are on your agenda tonight later in this presentation. And then finally, if there were no major concerns at the conclusion of the city's due diligence period, then the city would have 60 days to close on the property itself. One important point that I want to note was the city's insistence on negotiating favorable language specific to exercising our right to terminate, given the number of unknowns that are involved in this. As we negotiated part of this process, the city has the right to terminate the purchase sale agreement for any reason or no reason prior to the expiration of the examination period, and receive a refund of its earnest money deposit. So if there are any major red flags identified, if, as we do this preliminary space needs assessment, the range of build-out costs are determined for whatever reason to be prohibitive to the council can walk away from this, and the only expense will have been the contractual awards that are on your agenda for this evening. Oops. Okay. Whoops. I'm going to jump ahead to this one. I'm going to come back. So, in understanding the opportunity that this represents financially, I wanted to provide some historical context for property sales in Conway Park. Certainly, as you can see from this slide, it goes back almost a decade. We've experienced fluctuations or cycles in the market, but this opportunity before us tonight is really unprecedented. And I'll orient you to the two green bars because they both represent this building, 1925 Field Court. 5 years ago, this property sold for nearly $180 a square foot. Just 2 years ago, it was appraised at $12.5 million, which is about $127 a square foot. We have the opportunity to acquire it now for just over $35 a square foot. And I think if you look at even some of the lower numbers that you can see on that chart, the two lowest from February of 21 and again from April of 24, they represent the building next door, and for comparison, that building is about half the size, a little over half the size of 1925. That limits its marketability to some buyers. It's also about 25 years older and, importantly, has no underground parking. And so to see that even that sold just a couple of weeks ago for $49 a square foot, again, just emphasizes the unique opportunity that we have here. One final note on the bottom of the slide, just as a pertinent, I think, external comparable, the village of Rosemont went through a similar exercise just a couple of years ago for the purchase and adaptive reuse of an office building for conversion into a new police facility, and they paid about $107 a square foot. So again, I think the data is pretty clear that 5 years ago, this would not have been a financially viable solution for us. And if you think about the cycles and trends of the real estate market, 3 to 5 years from now probably will not be a viable option for us then either. So with that, I'm just going to kind of summarize with, the key considerations of the purchase sale agreement, and also thinking about the totality of the project or the proposal that's before you. If we are to move forward with this, it will really achieve numerous goals for the city. Would have the added benefit of enhancing police operations, not just today, but for many years to come. As the mayor noted, it is a critical community priority for us. It provides the opportunity for future expansion of the current public safety building for our fire department operations to ensure that remains a viable facility for them for the next several decades. And it's all being done consistent with the city's commitment to both fiscal and environmental stewardship, while providing significant long-term savings and benefits to future generations of Lake Forest taxpayers. And really, that's sort of the Lake Forest way of how we've done things historically in this community, making decisions today for the betterment of future generations. And this project certainly has the opportunity to be done in a manner that could save tens of millions of dollars for future city councils and taxpayers compared to addressing this problem 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So the last thing I will conclude with before turning it over to Deputy Chief Zelk is just a very high-level timeline of what comes next if the council is to take action tonight. As previously referenced, approvals tonight would trigger the formal review period for the city to conduct its due diligence on the property. That includes developing a range of estimated build-out costs for a full construction of this that the council will consider in the future. Certainly would consider prior to closing on the project in late summer. The one thing that is not included on here is a planned phase 1 environmental site assessment. It's important for the community to know that that is part of our due diligence process. It's not included for council approvals because the cost to conduct that work is within staff's authority to approve. But again, I want people to understand that that work will be part of this as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to just talk very briefly about the 2 contractual approvals that are on your agenda tonight, and then we'll turn it over to council for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Wisha. I promise we're on the last leg of this relay, so we'll get through this. Honorable Mayor Tack, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council, members of our community. In March, the city manager directed staff to complete requests for proposal for 2 essential professional services to help the city continue to investigate the viability of the 1925 Field Court site as the potential new home for the police department. Brought before you tonight and subject to your approval are RFP awards for a building and property site analysis as well as a space needs analysis study. The first service is a whole building and property site analysis. which, when completed, will inspect all of the major components, systems, structures of 1925 Field Court. Like any property purchase, this gives us our opportunity as a potential buyer to complete a thorough inspection of the site with a focus on the age of these systems and what state they're in. This is our version of a typical home inspection. However, we want to make sure the specifics about the structure, the roof, the HVAC system, the windows, the elevator, the underground parking area, that they're all in order. In April, we received proposals from 4 firms and a selection committee consisting of Ms. Cerniak, Mr. Lockefer, and myself went through all of the proposals, and we recommend to council award Concord Group with a contract for the building analysis in the amount of $19,950 plus a $5,000 contingency for a total of $24,950. Staff was particularly impressed with Concord's methodology, previous experience, and that a professional cost estimator is included on their team. We believe this will be key to understanding what is the lifespan of those current systems and to help the city plan for improvements that will be needed in the future. And just on an additional note before I go on to the next slide with both the building assessment and the needs assessment study, is regarding the slightly larger than typical contingency that you see here. This is done mainly for 2 reasons. Reason 1 is that there's an extremely narrow timeline in which we need to complete all these professional services. In order to comply with the conditions of the purchase sale agreement, these services need to be completed within that PSA window. And secondly, you know, we don't do this every day. It's not something that, you know, purchasing large properties for adaptive reuse is really a project of this scope that we do. So we want to make sure that we're very deliberate in everything that we do and that we're providing you with the best possible information. It's got a tight timeline. There's the potential for some unseen challenges and the complexity that can go into constructing a modern police facility. We believe a larger contingency is required to allow us to be the most agile that we can be with getting these important services to you so that you can make the best informed decisions. The second service is the space needs analysis, and this service is more specific to how a new police department facility meets the current and future needs of our community and our police employees. The selected firm will do an in-depth study of our agency's operational and support needs and really identify 3 critical areas. What are the essential spaces? What are those desirable should-have spaces? And then lastly, what are those nice-to-have spaces for a new facility? Most importantly, the selected firm will begin the process of conceptual renderings, future space planning, and preparation of cost estimates to adapt 1925 Field Court into a modern police facility. As with the previous building assessment RFP, the selection committee received and reviewed proposals from 4 firms. For the space needs analysis study, we recommend the council award FGM Architects with a contract for this service in the amount of $24,400 plus a $6,100 contingency for a total of $30,500. FGMA is a leader in planning, designing, and constructing police facilities. They have a client list of hundreds of agencies where they've provided similar services. Most notably, they have a substantial amount of experience with adaptive reuse, helping design and build these types of state-of-the-art police facilities for the villages of Skokie, Mount Prospect, Bensonville, and as the city manager mentioned, for the village of Rosemont, who is also in the process of adapting a large office building into a police facility. As discussed, these 2 services are going to be essential for us to continue the city's due diligence process. I strongly believe that these recommended firms, both FGMA and Concord Group, will provide high-quality data so that you can make the best informed decisions on whether or not we go forward with this project or not. Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
And with that, we'll turn it over to council for any questions or conversation.
Excellent. Can't imagine there'd be any questions or comments. So I'll ask for some. Are there any comments or questions from the audience?
Yeah, I do have a few comments, and just for the benefit of the public, when this was initially brought to us, there was not a uniform opinion. You know, if we're all thinking the same, we're not thinking. And I want to assure everybody that we talked about this in some detail. I think what's important for us to realize is we're just at the beginning of this process. We have to go through and do our due diligence. We're going to have a 90-day period where we can do all that, no pun intended, investigative work and really know what we're getting into. I think, you know, really the space needs analysis are critical. I think uses are critical. And I think that knowing that this is the first step in a long process is important for our residents to realize. The second thing that I think is incredibly important, to echo what the mayor said, 95% of the community viewed police and fire services as most important. And looking at this and evaluating that, I think fulfills our obligation to those residents to make sure that, you know, we're doing what they put value in. And I think pursuing the best options for both our police and fire department. And one thing I would add, you know, the other side of the coin is that if we do see fit to move into this building and do some adaptive reuse with that building, we do have a large portion of the current public safety building that will need to be reutilized by the fire department. And I would like earlier rather than later to have Chief Siebert and his team look at that existing facility and say, all right, these are the things that we can do, because ultimately I think this decision is driven not only by public safety, but it's really an investment in the future. I want to applaud my colleagues for looking at it that way. Again, looking at the cost of building anew. This is clearly a very viable option for us moving forward. So I think we have a lot of moving parts, and we do have 90 days, which is not a lot, and we're putting a lot on the police department and the city manager to give us the information that we need in that period of time. But I feel good about this. I've come a long way from my position when we first started, and that's for sure. I know one of the criticisms that we're going to hear, and I just want to present it right away, is that the location of this facility could be problematic. And I have thought about that in great detail. What I do want to say is buildings don't make people safe. The men and women of law enforcement make us safe. And those are the people that are out on the streets. The most important thing is that they're out on patrol and they're keeping our community safe. The building is really ancillary, but it's going to allow them the opportunity to execute their mission all that better. But moving out to Conway Park, one of my colleagues and I were talking about, this is a service-oriented organization, our government. And the best analogy I can come up with is when our old municipal services building used to be on Laurel Avenue. And we took it and threw it all the way out there in Conway Park. And I don't know that many people saw any change. It's still very accessible. I go out there. I know many residents do. When I'm there, I see them out there. We're still able to provide the same level of services. So I would anticipate that being the same with the police department. I know there's some various walkarounds that we can do in terms of possibly substations or things of that nature, but I feel really good about this. And in the first step, I think we're taking a very good one, and I think that it is really adhering to our principles of being good fiscal stewards and looking forward and investing in the future. So those are my thoughts, Mayor.
Very good. Are there others? Yes, Alderman Weber.
Thank you. I was a little surprised to see a 25% or more contingency amount allotted for these two proposals that we have in front of us. I certainly understand the time constraint, but I don't know if someone can speak to that a little more.
Yeah, I think Kevin did a nice job of articulating it. Our intent and goal is never to utilize the contingency dollars. It's just to provide the flexibility in this case because of that narrow time frame. If we found ourselves in a situation where we might have to wait 2 weeks to come back and get council approval for a slight amendment to the contract, those could be 2 very critical weeks for us. So certainly hear your concern. It is not something we would have, as was noted, traditionally request, but it is, again, unique to this project.
Thank you. And I had one other comment, just that we had received an email today from a resident who really spoke to this, which I think our city manager commented as well, that this building at one point was considered for residential use. And I just wanted to reiterate that at this time. It came to our knowledge that the Conway Park Association had said that they weren't looking to go in that direction. So they were in support of our intention for this property.
Correct. And I think without elaborating too much, I think there is still strong confidence from the Conway Owners Association about the inevitable rebound in the market there. If and when the commercial real estate market turns around, Conway is really well situated with high quality Class A office space, the Lake Forest name attached to it, and its location proximity to 294 there. So, there may be other areas throughout the region that may struggle, Class C office spaces, but we're confident as we look out 3 to 5 years from now that there will be a strong rebound, and that's what they're betting on as well.
Yeah, I just echoing Alderman Goshgarian, and I think this is really the critical next step, and so I'm in support of seeing us through.
Other comments or questions? Alderman Powers.
Thank you, Mayor Tack. Just some of my initial thoughts. This is important work for us to do as a council because there is a meaningful investment of just over $55,000 in a short period of time, which concerns me. I mean, I think the very first thing we should do is try to extend that to 30 days that's available. Because I think that process is there'll be a binary result. It'll either confirm that this is a good site and repurposing it will allow us to be all the, fiscally responsible stewards we claim to be to avoid substantial costs 10, 15, 20 years down the road, particularly if we had to greenfield a site like this. I would just encourage us to make sure we have the right project plan and project team to manage through this because the 90 days or the 120 days is going to go very quickly. But I think it's a smart thing to do and we should move forward.
Sure. And that's a fair point. I'll just note that while it is an accelerated schedule by municipal standards, it's actually a pretty generous due diligence period in the context of property acquisitions in the commercial real estate market. So the seller was pretty generous in understanding that our timeframes and processes move a little slower than, say, your average investor, but understood the concern, and certainly we're confident we can get the work done in that window.
No, I will certainly acknowledge that, but I think the use that we're looking to use this facility for is significantly different than if it was another group of tenants moving into an office building. So
no question.
That's why I was concerned.
Yep, it's a great point.
Thank you.
Alderman.
Thank you, Mayor Tack. I don't want to just repeat everything that Alderman Goshgarian, Alderman Weber, and Alderman Powers said, but I too came to this from a very different starting point than I am at now. And I too appreciate the financial responsibilities that we have, and I do see this as an opportunity to accomplish a big thing in the most responsible, fiscally responsible way possible. I am comforted by the 90-day due diligence period so that we do have an out if this isn't going to work. And I think we need to take complete advantage of every opportunity we have to be sure that whatever we spend moving forward, not these contracts, but in the repurposing of this building and the public safety building for the fire department moving forward, that we're really getting what we need and that it really is possible to do what we need. And knowing that we can cancel the contract if we don't get the results we need is very comforting to me. So I'm in favor of moving forward at this point.
Other comments, questions? Alderman Preschlack.
Yeah, great comments. Thank you, everybody. You know, I joined the council in 2018, and we have this annual workshop, so this capital budgeting workshop in November, and we have all the capital projects that we're going to do next year, and we have this 5-year forecast, and then we classify ones that are priorities but no funding. And this has been on our horizon for many, many councils, I think, and I don't want to say this thing fell in our lap, because there was a lot of really thoughtful work and due diligence and strategic thinking on that. So I'd like to thank the mayor and the staff and all the council members to be thoughtful in this deliberation. But it's really a unique opportunity. And if you think of it with all the other communities to the south of us or to the west that have had to build greenfields, and it's 2-3x the cost potentially. And if you look at our available space, I mean, this is kind of a unicorn here for something that's been a strategic project. And I just really am encouraged by it. And like you said, we can go through these steps, and we don't have to do it if it doesn't work out. But it's really unique, and it quite frankly reminds me of 10 years ago when people said we have a need to solve our pension crisis and to get ahead of it, right? So we have this need. It's been identified for 10 plus years, and we have a chance to get ahead of it. And that's what the city council is supposed to do: lead and be thoughtful and be fiscally responsible. But I really have a lot of confidence in all your guys' ability to pull it off, because I'll be out of here in a meeting. But I just can't thank you enough, city staff and the mayor and the council, for thinking about this existing need. And I think it's just you really are doing a service to future generations from asking the right questions and doing the tough thing now, so we can benefit in the future and people go, wow, that's what they did, that's great. So thank you for your consideration after I term off.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mayor.
Walter.
One of the things, I'm a newer member of the council, and you being one of the longer members, I'm struck in my first year the magnitude to which the council and the city leads with purpose and with direction, in consideration, careful consideration of existing ordinances that are in place, rules, processes. And this is another example of the city and the city staff considering all aspects of the decision-making process. And so I, too, because of that, am very comfortable in making this decision to move forward.
Great. Are there any others? Alderman Waldeck.
Well, I would just have to say, having seen the criminal justice system from a firsthand position, that the world has changed tremendously in the last 10 years in terms of what is required of the police and how it affects really what you do once a case comes in and how it goes through. And I know George Asuko's here, and George will testify. We just got done building a new courthouse up in Waukegan, and we had to re-equip it, every courtroom, with cameras and screens and everything else. So this is an opportunity for the city to look into the future at a very opportune time for a lot of reasons. And I commend the mayor for his ability to see this forward and to see this through and to present it. I support it. I'm following Jim right off, and I applaud you, Jim, for what you had to say about this, about being fiscally responsible. And I think it'll be a great service to our community, it really will, and especially to our police force. And if you've ever been to, and a lot of people don't like to go to the police departments, let me tell you, a lot of people don't walk in voluntarily, but if you've been there, ours is woefully inadequate. And we need to get into the future. We don't need to get into the future. We need to be where we should be now. So,
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make a couple comments about this as well. without sort of beating it to death. The first is, and this has been referenced, this actually, as early as, this summer, past summer, this project was on our long-term capital improvement schedule out potentially 8 to 10 years, along with some other very large potential projects. The driving force behind this was a unique economic environment that created an opportunity, and a concept was developed based on an awareness of that unique economic opportunity. It came to the city staff and the city council, and the thoroughness and the pace at which they were able to take this concept, which initially everybody's reaction to it, as I recall, was sort of eyes looking at the ceiling and, oh yeah, sure. But as we dug into it very rapidly, sort of the staff, finance, development, police department, everybody went after this thing and started looking at it. And as we put the pieces together, it really became apparent that this was not only a doable concept, but really a remarkable opportunity, and the kind of opportunity that, because we are governed so well by our boards, commissions, city council, city staff, that we can take an advantage of these opportunities, and we're willing to sort of think differently. So I really commend everybody who's been involved in this, in bringing this project to this point, because I really do think it is remarkable and the kind of thing that the city of Lake Forest does very, very well. Couple other points that I would like to make, one of which is the size of the facility, or of the building, I should say. It's quite large, but when you do research and you look at what other communities have done in the past 10 years in terms of developing public safety facilities, the number one thing they will tell you is, we didn't build it big enough. We're out of space already. 5 years out from a multi-million-dollar build-out, they're looking for more space. We have the opportunity with this building, because of the cost of the building, to somewhat over-allocate space. And I think that's a real benefit, while potentially still reserving space that may seek other purposes. The last thing I want to say is, there's been some commentary that, this results in neglecting the current public safety building and the fire department, and I have to say that this wasn't an appropriate combined use facility. That's why fire isn't a part of this conversation that you're hearing tonight, but that's not that we aren't thinking about that already. The building, the current public safety building, is not amenable to rebuild for the current purposes to meet the needs of both fire and police. That's very clear. It's in a floodplain. It's a terrible building in some respects. It clearly needs work, and we will have to begin thinking about what that means as this goes along. But to the extent that, as Alderman Preschlack alluded to, that this project done this way results in significant cost savings, that allows us to do other things. So I would like everybody to keep that in mind as we move forward. And I'll leave my comments to that. So, is there anybody from the public that would like to comment on this matter? Hearing none. We will then move on. I'm going to ask for a motion, and this is one motion for all four, if I'm not correct. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes, if a member of the council would like an item removed to vote on separately, they can. It's just like our general omnibus vote.
Okay, so what I'm going to do then is read all four items that will then be incorporated by one motion to approve. Okay, item one is approve a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a purchase and sale agreement with DP Westlake at Conway to acquire the real property at 1925 Field Court for the purchase price of $3,500,000 with a 90-day due diligence period, and authorizing payment of an earnest money deposit in the amount of $100,000. Item 2, authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with FGM Architects for a space needs analysis for the police department in the amount of $24,400 plus a $6,100 contingency for a total of $30,500. Item 3, authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Concord Group for a whole building and site assessment at 1925 Field Court Department in the amount of $19,950 plus a $5,000 contingency for a total of $24,950. And finally, authorize an advance from 2025 funding to cover work completed, if any, prior to May 1st, 2024. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the item?
So moved. Seconded.
This will be a roll call vote.
Alderman Walther.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Waldeck.
Aye.
Alderman Notes.
Aye.
Alderman Powers.
Aye.
Alderman Preschlack.
Aye.
Alderman Goshgarian.
Aye.
Alderman Weber.
Aye.
8 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Very good. At this time, are there any other items that the council members would like to comment on or questions? Okay. Hearing none, there being no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.